What's up, Hacksters? It's my favorite day of the week, which is Tuesday, when I get to interview awesome people like Nick Poole, who is here with us today. Nick, what are you?
What am I? I am a engineer, research and development engineer for SparkFun in the SparkX department, and then I just make stuff. I'm a maker.
Yeah. So, what kinds of things do you work on at SparkX? It's a very mysterious, interesting part of SparkFun.
Yeah, so SparkX is interesting because it's kind of like a rogue engineering department. Instead of we talk about how SparkFun has kind of two different product what's the word, like sort of product philosophies. One is more market driven, where we're listening to what the customers have asked for, we're looking at things we've released in the past, and then we are deciding as a group, oh well, this needs to be updated, or customers really want this thing. And that's what sort of the engineering department does. And then there's SparkX, which just sort of looks at bigger trends. We look at whatever floats across our email inboxes, as far as like, if DigiKey sends out a newsletter and they're like, hey, we have this new line of sensors. We're like, hey, those look kind of cool. Let's do a breakout for that. Or just whatever's going on in our lives. I know Nate has rolled, our founder, has rolled out quite a few products that were just things he built for himself. And then he was like, hey, other people might want one of these. And I know that I've seen YouTube videos of stuff and been like, ooh, that could be a product. We should build something around that. And so it's, just a little bit of everything.
We got like multi-band surveying antennas, Artemis global trackers. Lots of interesting stuff here. Helical antenna.
We focus pretty heavily on things that are compatible with what we call the Quick system, which is our, it's basically just sort of a four conductor connector that we've standardized on for I2C or two-wire stuff. So we try to make everything sort of compatible with that, especially in SparkX. But yeah, we kind of do whatever we want, whatever looks fun, and there's no pressure for it to perform particularly well. We just put it on, we build, maybe 20 or 50 or 100 of something, put it on the website. And if it doesn't sell, we don't build any more of them and we do something else.
Very sort of small run, artisanal. You could totally call these like small run artisanal electronics.
They are, yes, exactly.
So what do you work on there? What have you built anything that would like show up in the catalog here? Or
I think the latest thing that I released that's probably visible in the catalog right now is I think I called it the Quickness, Quiicnes, and it is a Nintendo NES controller adapter for I2C, and also for just sort of like general 5-volt GPIO. So the idea is it's a little PCB that has the NES connector on the front of it there. And it's got a 32U4 that's running some firmware I wrote that just is constantly. So the inside of those controllers, those NES controllers, they're just 8-bit shift registers. Which is why the controller has 8 buttons. Each button is represented by 1 bit in the shift register. And so you just strobe the shift register and read out those bits, and you get all the button states. And then on this product, what I'm doing is it has some registers that you can access over the 2-wire interface to get the state of the controller. But it also has 8 separate GPIO with LEDs on them that reflect the state of the controller at all times.
Ooh,
so
yeah.
If you don't want to do any like fancy programming, or you don't want to, you can literally just hook up to those pins, and those pins go high when you press the corresponding button.
That's super cool. So presumably, based on your description, you might have built this because you were thinking of building some kind of a project yourself and you wished that this existed?
Well, in this particular case, I think what had happened was I found out that you could buy. I was watching YouTube videos of like refurbishing. I don't know if you've watched these awesome YouTube videos where people just refurbish like old game systems.
Ooh, that sounds really nice.
It's awesome because video game systems, like they live pretty rough lives most of the time. So so they'll be colored all over with markers, or they'll be
Oh
browned
yeah.
with cigarette smoke, and just
And just
whatever.
like,
They've been living in somebody's game room for years.
oh man.
And people buy these things super cheap, tear them down, clean them up, do whatever soldering repair, electrical repair needs to happen, replace things, and then they have this like brand new shiny system, right? Retro gaming system, and it's so satisfying to watch. And I realized that some company is still making that connector for the NES controller. we should just offer that. Like, that should be a part we have in our catalog, right? And
Yeah.
when I started digging into it, I was like, well, if we're going to offer the part, we should offer a breakout. And then it's like, well, if we're going to do a breakout, then, and it just...
You give a mouse a cookie.
Exactly. Yeah. And then eventually it turns into that product. So
that's awesome. Oh, I wonder what kinds of other adapters might you have made?
Let's see what else. I also did, while I was doing that, I did one for the...
There's also like a classic one on here as well.
Yes. So Nintendo very confusingly named their re-release of... They sort of like made a little emulator box with a bunch of their games built into it that they released as the NES Classic, which it makes finding controllers and things very confusing because the two pieces of hardware are not related in any way. And so when you try to look up like a classic Nintendo controller, you get a controller for the Nintendo Classic.
That's horrible. Oh no.
And so but it's the cool thing about it is that the controllers are already I2C compatible out of the box. That's how they communicate with that system. They use the exact same connector and the same protocol as the Wii nunchucks. So you can actually plug one into a Wii nunchuck. And also you can plug it into anything that will talk to a Wii nunchuck, including a lot of existing Arduino libraries. And so this product is, honestly, it's pretty similar to a product that Adafruit has carried for a while. It's similar to a product that we used to carry and then stopped making for a while. The first round of sort of Wii nunchuck hacks really like brought up a bunch of these type products. And then when I rediscovered like, these same products will work for the NES, for the Nintendo Classic controllers, I was like, wow, I gotta go make an updated version of that board that's easier to use and it has our quick connectors on it, so you can just plug it into your system without soldering. So
oh man, I love the sort of upcycling / right to repair / maintenance, anti-obsolescence aspects of this, where you're really preserving old hardware that doesn't deserve to die, and that, like, could be given new life with just this one little thing. Like, you can bring it sort of into the modern era if you want, or you can like fix a broken system and update it with something new instead of throwing it away. That's so beautiful.
There are so many people making reproduction basically controllers that are NES controllers in every way, except it's like, I just need one of these for my robot, or I just need this for, whatever. And we're making brand new products that mimic the old ones because, because we have nostalgia for that old form factor. And it's like, why don't you just use the old ones? We've got tons of them floating around and we're making more of them for whatever reason, because of this sort of resurgence of retro hardware. So I'm all about like, dig up that old Nintendo controller and put it to work.
Yeah, I've done some stuff with Nintendo zappers. It's and they're just super fun. Like, tearing out the guts, I was never like good enough to like plus they interact with the screen in a specific way with the light gun stuff. But yeah, they're great hardware and they've got this wonderful tactile interface. Speaking of, this is more taking future hardware and like mimicking it, but you've also done some really cool cosplay props, such as this Ghost in the Shell thingy. What exactly is this thingy, actually?
So they don't... what's funny about it is that so this is a prop from the new movie, the live action movie.
I didn't see that one.
Yeah, it was fine. I actually liked it. I'm a huge Ghost in the Shell fan. I've always I've always said that Ghost in the Shell is probably one of my favorite like media universes, you know.
Uh-huh.
And I enjoyed the live action movie, and one of the scenes was inside this nightclub, and one of the things that happened in this nightclub was people had these like future, I don't, cyberpunk drugs, I guess, that were
It's
like
so
inhaler
crazy.
mask things,
Oh wow.
and they all had this. They had all. I noticed all this different branding on them, and I'm such
Mm.
a nerd for that. I love fake branding for,
Oh my
you
gosh,
know,
yeah.
fake companies, and so I waited for the prop store auction to happen where they were auctioning off
Oh.
props from that movie, and I started looking for, because that is a great way to find like
Oh.
high resolution images of all these props, because they're trying to sell them to people, right? So you got to have
Uh-huh.
lots of nice pictures.
Yeah, yeah,
um,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, so I found all these pictures of these things, and realized pretty quickly that all of the canisters are just spun aluminum bottles like you would buy for like an atomizer or a mister.
Uh-huh.
And you could buy them like anywhere online for like a couple bucks a piece. And then they had really nice high resolution shots of all of the labels. And the labels are these great things with this wild pop art on them, and big, you know, big kanji. And it really
Mm.
kind of feels like the label on like, you know, like trucker pills at gas stations.
Oh
You
yeah.
know, it's that same kind of sketchy, like, oh, I don't know if that's a good, you know, but the
Yeah.
labeling is like lightning bolts and, you know, words like dream or pain, you know. And
Uh-huh.
so like I thought that was so cool, and I went in, redid those labels in vector art, and then printed them out on just sort of some slick plastic. I can't remember exactly what I used. I think it was just the backing for the film that I put on the clear box to make it yellow. And
Oh.
so, and then I found that, yeah, if you print it with a laser printer, you can just tear the toner off with packing tape, and then that packing tape becomes a sticker. And so
Whoa.
that was one way that I made labels. And then I also experimented with uh, spraying the bottles with sort of a spray adhesive, like 3M
Wow.
Super 74 or whatever, and then
Uh-huh.
sort of like using that to you know, you wrap your artwork around that and then peel it off, and the all of the ink toner sticks to the glue, and that works fairly well.
Ooh.
And yeah, it's there are a lot of ways to get to transfer toner from like a laser print to an object, and I tried a bunch of different ones, and it seems like it really depends on what your application is. But yeah, the rest of that stuff is all either 3D printed, or it is just like found items or things from the internet, like the mask for the one that has sort of like a rebreather mask. It's
Mhm.
literally just an oxygen like an oxygen mask, a supplemental oxygen mask from Amazon. I think it costs like $5, you know,
Uh-huh.
and it's you could just, you know, you buy all this stuff and shove it together. It ends up looking kind of cool. It's not an exact
It
replica
looks so
of any
good.
one item in the movie, but it could be in the same set of items. You know what I mean? If you put them
Uh-huh.
all together, it would look like another one of these things that was in the movie.
It also, this toner transfer method that you're talking about for the aesthetics is so rad. We just got a laser printer here, and I just realized all the possibilities, including for like laser toner transfer etched PCBs. Have you ever done that?
No, but let's see. Actually, you know what? I did play with that a little bit. So when I was first doing, I actually have a video talking about doing that on my YouTube
Cool.
channel. It's a very old video. It's one of the early ones on that channel, but I do talk about doing that. I used that special blue transfer paper that you
Oh.
buy on like eBay or something. Really, there's no, I mean, it works fairly well, but you can use glossy magazine paper just as well, honestly, for that process. But yeah,
Hmm.
you print your mask on a laser printer, and then you iron it to your board and peel it back, and you have your mask there, and then you etch it, you know, using ferric chloride or whatever your favorite etchant is.
Hmm.
And I did do that process a handful of times and got pretty good results with it. I was really happy with how it turned out, but I ended up going from that process when I had access to a laser engraver,
Ooh,
I
yeah.
started doing a different process where I would spray paint the whole board with matte black spray paint, and then
Uh-huh.
I would use the laser engraver to laser away the parts of that I didn't want.
Oh, yeah, I've done a little bit of that as well.
Yeah.
Oh. It seems much more efficient than the whole toner transfer thingamajig. And also you're a lot more able to get sort of a consistent coating, I think, like a consistent edge, because you can like really clearly make sure that the spray paint is laid down thick, and then you can really clearly make sure that the other stuff is etched away. And then like, yeah.
Yeah, for me the step that really made a huge difference was what you do between taking that thing out of the laser and then putting it in your etchant tank. I found that a rinsing step with alcohol or
Mm.
something that wasn't too strong of a solvent, but would remove sort of the burnt spray paint from the areas that you had, laser removed.
Uh-huh.
I found that helped a lot, because there is a little bit of residue left. It's hard to remove that residue and not remove the paint that you want to stay. But a little bit of rubbing alcohol seems to work pretty well for that, actually.
Huh. Brilliant. That's a great tip. So if you're making your own PCBs by spray painting them and then etching away part of the spray paint, then you just like in between doing that and doing the etch bath, you like hit it with some rubbing alcohol?
Yeah, just I have those like wash bottles that you squeeze, and I just spray some alcohol at it and let it dry off of there. I wouldn't wipe it. I don't think wiping it is a good idea, but
That makes
just
sense.
sort of like use the spray of the alcohol to sort of rinse it down. I've had pretty good luck that way.
You did a really great transition here, by the way, to your YouTube channel. And you said that, so some of these are fairly old, but you're thinking about maybe starting it up again. Although you have one about the Boring Company flamethrower I'll have to look at. How did
Yeah,
that go?
it was super fun, and I ended up with a working flamethrower, and it was cool. So yeah, basically that YouTube channel is like it's gone through a lot of different eras of me trying different formats.
Uh-huh.
There are a lot of early videos on there that were shot in my first apartment in Boulder when I moved there to work for
Wow.
SparkFun, and I look like a totally different person.
Yeah,
This is like 10 years ago or something.
2012, Nick.
Yeah. And it was
That fisheye.
yeah, fisheye. I think that camera is literally a trail cam type thing. I don't think that it was a webcam. I think I was recording myself on this SD card camera and then editing that footage together with audio from this mixer and mic in post. It was really a lot of work for not a whole lot of production quality. I even did sort of a 2-camera thing where I would use the webcam on the laptop to try to show close-ups of things. It was a lot of work, and I think in the end, at the time, it looked okay. But there are still videos on there where it's like it's incredibly yellow. Everything is yellow for some reason. The audio sounds wildly bad for how much money I spent on the microphone and equipment. But I like the projects that I ended up showing on there, and then a couple years.
Really nice.
Yeah, thanks. After I stopped making videos there, I came back a few years later when I had actual shop space to work in, and I started trying to do more live stream content. So that's where sort of the second batch of videos comes from, where I was trying to do projects live, and there's some soldering, there's some PCB layout. That flamethrower build is part of the live series. And what I would do is I would stream live, and then I would edit them down after the fact into these sort of like bite-sized things that I could put up there. And it was fun to do, but I didn't ever have a lot of viewership. And honestly, it's like a hard thing to do if you don't script it. To do this live content by yourself. So
there's a lot of like talking, and it can really wear you down.
It can.
If you're not like talking to anyone.
Yeah, you're just talking to sort of the camera, and sometimes there's 2 people in chat, so there's 2 people in the whole world watching you, and you're just sort of talking to a camera. But yeah, I did a handful of those. The flamethrower was probably the most successful one because I really did start and end that project in one marathon live stream.
Wow.
And it was a Nerf blaster that I took apart and then filled with the guts of a propane, weed clearing burner, which is more or less what the Boring Company flamethrower is. Calling it a flamethrower, I think, is generous. It's a propane torch.
Yeah.
So I modified. You can kind of see in the video. I took this thing that I thought looked pretty similar to the Boring Company flamethrower. It was just whatever Nerf blaster I could buy at the local Target that was close enough. And I saw some chunks off of it. I jammed some new stuff in there. I added an electronic igniter.
Ooh.
I think I still have this project. It's out in the shop. And I think what I would do if I was going to approach this project again or try to improve it is I would actually add an electronic solenoid valve to the gas instead of trying to. What I did was I took the existing sort of squeeze valve that was on the burner, and I flipped the paddle around and bent it so that kind of when you pull it like a trigger, it pushes up on the valve. It kind of worked, but it really isn't the way it's designed to work. So you have to squeeze it pretty hard to put enough pressure on that valve to let anything through. So I think I would do an electronic trigger and a solenoid valve, and then that way I could connect it to the electronic igniter and have the igniter automatically fire when you pull the trigger, and it would be a little bit more clean. But in the end, I did end up having something that worked like the Boring Company flamethrower, and there is a video somewhere you probably won't be able to find. I think it was on my Instagram or something of me roasting a hot dog on the 4th of July. I bought one of those big, hot dog roasting forks, and I put some wieners on it, and I stuck it in the ground, and I roasted them with the flamethrower and ate them, and they were good.
Awesome. Did they get cooked all the way through? That's the concern I always have. Is it just going to get charred on the outside and then
Oh, right.
on the inside?
So I'm yeah, there you go. That's the action. I'm also laughing maniacally in that video. I was so happy that it was done. It was like a 6-hour build or something, and I was like, but yeah, no, having been a lifelong vegetarian, they were actually like tofu dogs. So they just had to get slightly warm.
Solid. So when you're making back to the PCBs thing, you've done stuff with these etchants and like doing them with a little bit of toner transfer, a little bit of like laser etching, and when you want to make PCBs nowadays, you probably have a whole fab shop at SparkFun that's just like, oh, I think I'll make a PCB today. I don't know, how does it work there? And when you make personal ones, is it the same, or do you have a different process that you use?
So making PC. So at SparkFun, we still have the PCBs made. The printed circuit boards themselves are made, third party. It is so inexpensive and so quick now to send them off to a company like JLC PCB or PCB Way or Osh Park or any of these, sort of prototype size PCB run companies. And so usually what happens is, we'll design a board, do a small review, and then send it out. And even if you order from JLC or PCB Way, one of these companies that does the entire thing in China, you can have your boards in your hand within a few days. And so it's kind of hard to beat that. We actually did look at, for a while we had what were they called before they were Bantam Tools?
Other Mill.
Other mill. We had some. We had a couple of other mills in the building that we would do, milled circuit boards with. Just put the whole sort of copper clad PCB in there and mill away what you don't want. And we did some prototyping that way, but it is a loud and slow way to prototype PCBs. And honestly, most of what we're looking for when we prototype is not so much electrical we're not so much checking the electrical performance, because a lot of the time what we're laying out are digital circuits. So we have a pretty good idea of how things are going to act, right? It's not like we're doing complex analog circuitry. So what we're really checking is like mechanical stuff. Like, is the footprint right? Is it going to be easy to reflow these parts? Are the pads too big? Are they too small? Or, things that really we don't learn anything if we make the PCB ourselves, because in the end, someone else is going to make the PCB when we go to manufacture. So we need to know how they're going to make it. So that's basically the way it works at SparkFun, is we get our PCBs in from one of these companies, and then we build it up in our little sort of mini like assembly line. So SparkFun itself has in-house assembly. We assemble almost all of the products that are SparkFun originals are things that we build in Colorado. So we have production staff, we have people who are assembly techs that solder full time. We have people who run machines. We have the reflow ovens and pick and place machines and automated solder stencil machines. We have a selective soldering machine, which is one of the coolest things I've ever watched.
Is that the solder fountain?
Yeah, it's a solder fountain. It just sprays molten solder, and it's absolutely wild. And so we have
posts like videos of theirs every now and then, and I'm just like, yes, the solder fountain.
It's great. It is. It's like one of those chocolate fountains, but with molten metal. And so we have all that stuff. But when SparkX wants to make a little prototype, or we want to make 20 or 50 of something, it doesn't really make sense to try to interrupt the manufacturing workflow and say, hey, can you stop making 2,000 Arduino Pros and make my 30 barometric pressure sensor breakouts. And so we have a little pick and place machine, a little Charm High pick and place machine, which is this Chinese company that makes this relatively inexpensive computer vision guided pick and place machine. It's a very modern, reliable machine. I see a lot of smaller hardware companies using them as their primary assembly machine. It works great for SMT parts. It doesn't do any sort of through-hole placement, but it is very capable. And I think you can get one for between $2,000 and $4,000. So, that's maybe just out of reach for your average sort of homemaker. But if you are, running a little garage industry, making synthesizers or something, it's totally a well worth an investment. So we have one of those. We have done a lot of work to make it reliable for us. We wrote some scripts so that we can export our position data from Eagle, which is what we use for board layout, into placement data for this machine. So everything is like pretty streamlined in that regard. And then we do have a small batch oven for reflow, but generally what we end up doing is just sneaking downstairs and throwing it onto the conveyor in production, because the oven is running whether there's something in it or not. It's a conveyor oven, so we just wait between batches and toss our stuff on there. And and then with solder stenciling, we stencil everything by hand in SparkX. Everything in SparkX is more or less built just by hand, because we're only doing tens of units. If we have to build hundreds of something, we consider either that needs to be what we call a red board, so a genuine SparkFun product that comes on a red PCB, or we will do sort of an expanded SparkX run where it stays as a black PCB, but we schedule it with our manufacturing department, and they actually run it through its paces there. But so we do have like a little lab sort of where we can build 20, 50, 100 of something. And as far as at home, when I want to build a handful of things, I actually have I have backed into having a pretty full-featured SMT line. So in my shop, I actually have a Mancore pick and place machine that I got it's actually technically it belongs to a friend of mine. He bought it from SparkFun. It was one of SparkFun's early machines. It's a fantastic pick and place machine, huge, heavy piece of equipment.
Ooh.
It requires, special power, and it needs a air compressor hooked up to it and all this stuff. And I think when it was new, it was probably an $80,000 piece of equipment. Now, I think we bought it from SparkFun for a few grand. But it's still great. It still works great. And so I have that. I have a small manual pick and place table that has like a vacuum tip on it for hand placement. I have a 5-zone conveyor oven. I have a little cheap stencil printer. So I can do runs of, basically as many things as I want to. And something I've been trying to hype myself up to do lately has been to actually like do that, build large numbers of a thing, design something that I like, and try to maybe sell it on Tindy. Just build more than 5 of something. A lot of the time, honestly, when I'm just doing prototypes for SparkFun, I order the PCBs. They come to my front door. I stencil them by hand, just sort of like on my desk, and then I place them by hand, and I reflow them on a little cheap hot plate that I bought at Walmart. that is totally sufficient for 5 prototypes.
Legit. And yeah, so tell us about some of your recent projects. You've got, well, maybe not so recent, but this one is like has something to do with Space Invaders.
Yeah, I nicknamed that one Cosmic Aggressors.
Oh yeah.
And it is it's a little Space Invaders game where the idea in my head was I was playing with all of these designs where I would stack PCBs on top of each other and then backlight, basically use the front PCB as a mask, as a light mask, and then I would backlight it. And I did some 7-segment digital displays that way, and they looked pretty good. I really liked the way that those turned out. And then I was thinking about, what else can you do with this besides just 7-segment? Like, you could do anything you want. You can make any shape you want, light it up in different ways. And around the time that I was thinking about that, I found this article about the way that the Nintendo Game & Watch games were prototyped. So I don't know if anyone remembers Game & Watch, but Nintendo had these systems that were kind of like, in the US, we mostly played Tiger handheld games, is most people's sort of experience with this type of gaming, where you have a little console, basically a handheld thing that only has one game on it. And the reason it only has one game on it is because the entire game is played on an LCD screen that has fixed segments.
Yeah.
And the game is designed around lighting up different parts of those fixed segments to give you the impression that some action is happening on screen.
I had like
so
a
there would
Lion
be
King
like,
one.
oh, that's so great. Yeah, they did like, I think they did like a Frogger port for that. They had a Mortal Kombat one or a Street Fighter one that was like pretty wild. There were baseball games and football games and all sorts of things. And it turns out when Nintendo went to prototype these at the time, this was, I guess, when were they prototyping these? In the 70s or 80s. And so they didn't have access to the sort of fab where they could design a LCD panel, have it fabbed, play with it, and say, oh, well, it needs to be a different shape or it needs to do a different thing. So what they did instead was they would blow up the whole game to something that would sit on a table, and they made them out of backlit wooden boxes. So they would make a wooden box. They would make all of the segments basically masked out on a big sheet of plastic, and then they would backlight them with incandescent bulbs. And so instead of, turning segments on an LCD dark or light, you would turn these bulbs on and off. And so you would play this Game & Watch game as a big box of light bulbs. And that's how they prototyped them. And I thought, oh, well, anything that you could make a Game & Watch game out of, you could do using this LED backlighting thing, right? You're doing the same thing, just on a very small scale. And so I thought, what is an arcade game that is easy to represent in fixed segments? And I thought about, lots of different, I thought about Galaga. I thought about, various like Centipede type games. Pong, you could do that way, but it's kind of been done. And eventually it was like Space Invader. Space Invader is fun.
Yeah.
It has super recognizable little sprites that are super fun to design. And on top of that, it was the sprites were super, the whole thing is like a very low resolution classic game. So making those.
Sorry, what is the
No.
resolution on this? It's like 8 by.
I believe it's. Oh, what was it? I believe it's 8 by.
It's like maybe 30 or 40.
I don't think it's even that many.
No. It's like 20 something.
Yeah, it may be 20 something. Basically, like I tried to get the very minimum amount that I could get away with, because the more LEDs you put on there, the slower the gameplay you can play, because you have to update all of those. They're all in one long strip, right? I'm using addressable LEDs on that. And so the longer that strip gets, the denser your screen gets, the longer it takes to update everything on the screen. So because you have to update every pixel on the screen, right? You can't just sort of selectively update the screen, because you have to shift your update information through all of the LEDs to get there. So so it hurts your frame rate to have higher resolution games. But so what you want to do is figure out, like in this sort of Space Invader game, I was like, how many steps from top to bottom is a fair amount of steps for this thing to go before you run out of time to shoot it. And then also, because everything is on a fixed grid, you have to think about how. So every other row of LEDs is lighting up Invaders, and then every row between those is lighting up bullets, I guess you'd call them. So there are little bullet lines in between every Invader, so that when you fire, your bullet goes up to meet the Invaders. And then for the Invader explosions, because they're RGB LEDs, you can play with that dimension. You can play with color. So instead of having to make an animation of like an explosion or a pop or a smoke cloud, you can just make the Invader like flash white and then turn red and fade out, and it's like, oh, it exploded, right?
Yeah. That's super cool. So back to this Arduino guy that you were making. Why did you make your own Arduino clone, and what's its deal?
So I was, this was a time when I was super obsessed with stacking PCBs together and finding different ways that they can be used in mechanical assembly. So not just as, the carrier for the electronics, but also as a way to interact with the object, right? So this was basically just an experiment to see if I could combine this idea of like, okay, so you can see on the end, the reset button is a sort of a tongue on the PCB that you press really cool. down. Yeah, and you press it down against a mechanical button. So there is an actual tactile switch underneath it. But that added mass of the tab above it that you're pressing down on gives it this really satisfying click.
Oh, I bet it makes it a little bit more pleasant to press as well, because it has an actual like surface instead of just being that tiny little button.
Yes, my only complaint about, I love those little brass tactile switches. They're my favorite thing, but my only complaint is you have to press them with your fingernail.
Yeah, it's not even one of the 6mm little black plastic ones. It's one of the pretty brass ones. Oh, it's so aesthetically pleasing.
It's so not. And then, the other thing you get to do with that is you put an LED under there, and now you have an illuminated button.
Yes.
Out of these two very simple SMT components. And then you can see I also took the status LEDs for the Arduino. So things like the serial in and serial out. And I think maybe the built-in LED, I can't remember, pin 13 LED. And I gave them their own glyphs with little backlit icons, and tried to make a sort of like a designer Arduino, right? Like a very sort of clean, modern, bougie Arduino, I guess, And in the end, it was like an interesting thing to look at. I don't know if it's something people need, right? Like how many Arduino clones have to exist. I don't know, but this was at least unique and pretty to look at.
It's very pretty.
And yeah, it's just two PCBs. The bottom PCB has all of the circuitry on it, and then the top one is basically just the button and the LED masks and some branding and stuff. And you just solder them together with, I think they're just spaced apart by 0.1 inch headers with the the little plastic spacer on there is the right height that you can just sort of sandwich two PCBs right up against each other, and it works pretty well.
Yeah, I love the sandwiching there, and also the way that you have the headers mounted on there with the right angle just sticking out the sides is really nice. It makes it a lot more compact, like vertically, obviously. Well, actually, maybe is it more compact than having just like vertical headers if you have this extra one on top?
It is more compact. It's still shorter than a sort of a standard R3 layout with vertical headers. The only that's actually my pick and place machine there. Cool. Trying to put one of these together. But yeah, it is more compact than that. The only thing you give up, of course, is sort of the shield, stackable shield interaction, course, yeah. Right? So now you don't get to like put these entirely pre-made breakouts onto it. But I've always kind of liked the idea of a small, or like something that I have designed a few times and made some that just sort of hang around my desk. And I wish I had one handy that I could show you, but something that I've always kind of wanted is to go to one of our cable suppliers that makes custom cables and literally just make me an Arduino cable, like make me a USB cable that I plug in. And then on the other end of the cable is just a bunch of alligator clips. Oh, right. And those alligator clips represent GPIO.
Yeah, that's all I want. Squid, an Arduino squid.
I laid out a PCB that was a squid that had like big eyes, like the big round cartoon eyes with the big slice taken out of them, like Homer, like Mr. Clean on was it? Whatever his name was on The Simpsons. But yeah, that
Cuphead style.
Yeah, exactly. And it was like one of those things that I designed. And I was like, maybe SparkFun would want to sell this. And I talked to some people about it. It was like, yeah, we should kind of do that. And then other projects came up, and then it just sort of like died, But that is the kind of Arduino I want, right? Is like a thing I can just plug into my USB port. I can hook it up to a thingamajig on my desk and write some quick code, because I'm not going to embed it in anything. I'm just using it as sort of like a test platform, right?
Yeah. Oh, that's great. I realized that there is like another sort of right angle connector that I've seen, which is the PMOD system. They sort of tend to stick out the side for expansions and stuff.
Interesting.
But like, it's it's 2 layers. It's not quite the same. But like, yeah, it's not unheard of. The squid, though, that's a whole other thing.
Yeah, maybe I need to revisit the squid.
Heck yeah. So another PCB project that I love of yours is, here's just like one that is not fully assembled. This is a, well, why don't you tell us what it is?
Yeah, so that's this little model of my reflow oven. So I bought this. So I had the opportunity to buy. This is what I'm talking about, where I've sort of backed into having a full SMT assembly line. Is I, adopted this pick and place machine, and then a friend of mine was going to move from Colorado to Australia, and he couldn't take his pick and place. Well, he could have taken his pick and place machine with him, but he wasn't going to. And it was in his garage, and he said, I want to sell this thing. I gotta get rid of it before I move. I'm not going to pay to freight it all the way to Australia. Do you want to buy it? And he was going to give me a pretty good deal on it. And I still couldn't really afford to do it at the time. So I thought, well, I'll buy it, and I'll try to sort of I'll try to get all my money back by selling a line of these little kits or something. And so the first thing I did was I made this little kit of the reflow oven itself. And so I launched some sort of crowdfunding campaign. I can't remember if it was on Kickstarter or I think it was Indiegogo probably. And I sold a handful of these kits that you snap apart this panel, you slot them together. It's sort of a tab and slot type system, and you attach them with solder. So when the two pieces slot together, there is a pad exposed at right angles to each other, and you sort of fill that with a fillet of hot solder, and it sticks the two things together mechanically. So you sort of slot this thing together, put some solder on it, and then on top of being a nice little 3D object, there's also a circuit that goes around the inside of like over multiple PCBs through those fillets.
Wow.
And so this reflow oven had a little switch on the front and a little coin cell battery on the back, and it had two little flickering LEDs, like the candle LEDs, you know, that you buy.
It's like a little face on the front with this resistor.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So you can see there's my little current limiting resistor and my two flickering LEDs. And when you flipped it on, you could see under the hood of the reflow oven, you could see light kind of coming out of it, like it was, you know, like it was hot. And yeah, it was like a super fun little project to try to make something that felt like a model kit, like a plastic model kit, but was made out of PCBs, could be manufactured in the way that you would expect PCBs to be made. And then also, you know, take advantage of the fact that, you know, you can build a circuit on these things. And so that sort of started this line of things that I started trying to build out of just nothing but PCB.
It's funny that this is a PCB of a reflow oven, and yet it's all like through hole.
I know, yeah. There was absolutely no reflow soldering required to build these, well, because I was using it to buy the oven, right? But yeah, it is funny that it's like, oh, it's a reflow oven that's all PTH. You have to hand solder it.
Why don't you show us the other one that you have there? I know you have another one there.
Yeah. So I have a few of these that I built or that I designed to take to the last Maker Faire in San Mateo, the last Bay Area Maker Faire. I know, RIP.
Yeah.
So the last time that they had one, I went and I brought these with me. My ring light is really blowing them out. But yeah, so I have 3 different kits like this. This one is a little ray gun. And it's just, I mean, all of these are just basically glorified LED throwies. So they'll have some sort of LED, some sort of battery, usually a coin cell, and then some sort of switch. And this one has a little button. I found a little right angle tactile switch that you solder right here. So when you pull the trigger, there's a little LED on the front that I actually used a color cycling RGB LED for this one, which again it's a great way to get a lot of like interactivity out of a very simple circuit, right? Like the circuit is just one LED and one switch. But if it's a color cycling LED, you know, you give that to a kid and they pull the trigger and it does something. It like flashes and makes different colors. So, you know, you don't have to necessarily put an Arduino on everything. You can just buy the little flashy LED and it works great. So that was one. I called that one Zap, and it's super fun. I also made another one that I called Fwoosh, and Fwoosh is a little rocket ship.
That's so good.
And I was really doing this like retro sci-fi aesthetic. So sort of like a 50s and 60s sci-fi with these little like egg-shaped rocket ships and these, you know, these very sort of bulbous ray guns, you know. And yeah, this one again is just you slot these two things together, solder them, and then it has, I think I put a flickering LED on the bottom of it so that when you put a coin cell battery in there, it sits there and flickers like it's launching off.
Oh.
But then this last one is one where I kind of thought like, I think I'm going to expand on this a little bit and build some more kind of similar to this, because this one I called Beep Boop, and he's a little robot guy.
Yes.
And the cool thing about this one that made him really different for me is that I included more different parts than you can sort of put on at once. So he's sort of customizable in a way. He's like a action figure that has different hands that you can put on him.
Yeah.
So when you build your version of the Beep Boop, you can decide whether you want him to have like little grippy claws, or if you want him to have like a circular saw or a drill or a laser blaster, right?
This
And
is
then
so good.
you could decide which one you want to put on it as his sort of like as his hands. And then I considered doing different sort of foot attachments as well, but the feet, because the feet are part of the whole sort of back structure of the robot, it would have taken up a lot more panel space to do different feet. So I decided against that. I just went for the hand attachments on this guy. But and then you can see I just used a lot of stop, a lot of like I didn't put any solder mask on this, but I put big metal layers so that you would have this sort of shiny metallic finish on it, and he would be a little metal robot guy.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, it worked reasonably well. I mean, when you put these things together, they feel solid. They feel, despite the fact that, you know, it is a sort of a universal rule that solder is not a mechanical connection, right? Like that is pounded into your head over the years. Like if you're gonna connect two wires, you got to make sure there's stress relief, because solder is not a mechanical connection. But despite that fact, it actually does a very good job of sticking all these things together and making them feel like a solid object. So I think in the future there are probably more of these coming. I want to do some that are maybe resemble things that you would recognize from pop culture. There is a cardboard model that I made to be laser cut of the Swordfish 2, which was Spike Spiegel's little jump ship from Cowboy Bebop. So I have that vector already. I just need to import that into Eagle, and I can very easily make a little PCB kit of that.
You have to do it now. You said it. You have to do it.
I said it. Now I have to do it.
That'd be amazing.
So
I just found a picture of us at that maker fair with you with your little robot guy.
Yes, so excellent. Yeah, that was so much fun. It was so weird because I was doing something that I hadn't seen anybody else do at Maker Faire before, where I was wearing my booth. Right. So I had sort of like the classic, like, you know, the people at like ballparks that are selling hot dogs or cigarette girls at like burlesque, where you have this box that is connected to you that has all your products in it. And then I had a big flagpole that had a flag on it that had my logo on it. And I just walked around with all of my kits, and I had a little card swipe thing for my phone so that I could take payment. And I just walked around selling these kits, and it was very confusing to the Maker Faire staff because they kept wanting to give me a table and a booth, and I kept telling them I don't need a booth. I don't need a booth.
Yeah, nobody wants to be stuck at a booth anyway.
Right, exactly. Well, that was the other cool thing, is like I got to be there, I got to sell some kits, and I got to see the whole fair because I just walked around. And because I wasn't, you know, I wasn't using any amplified music. I wasn't, you know, like I wasn't an art car. I could basically go anywhere I wanted. There weren't any restrictions on where I could walk around and sell my stuff. So I got to go and see the whole fair and be an exhibit at the same time, which is like the way to do it. If you have a local Maker Faire and you're going to go be an exhibitor, see if you can find a way to do a mobile exhibit, because it's the way to go.
It's honestly a fairly large part of why I do wearables, so that I can like have my thing with me and just like walk around and be kind of a moving exhibit type thing.
Totally.
So we should probably wrap up here. I can just talk about this stuff forever. You have so much fascinating stuff going on. People can find you if they want to continue delving into this stuff, which there's so much to look at. Twitter, your North Ireland Poole. People can find this in the description to the video. You've also got nickpoole.me with a bunch of stuff about your professional experience, and also you know, various stuff about content creation and whatnot. Past talks that you've done. There's one specifically about these 3D structures from PCBs from SuperCon. And then also your YouTube channel, Signal Ditch. We should subscribe to that, obviously. And you're thinking about coming out with some new stuff in the future?
Yep. So I've just last year I moved from Colorado, where I had been living for about 10 years, to work for SparkFun. I continue to work for SparkFun, but I now work remotely. I moved back to Virginia, where I'm from, so I could buy a house with a workshop building. And so
Yes.
I now have all of this space to do new projects, and it's
Wow.
taken me so far, it's taken me, a year and a half to get it to the point where I can even sort of build stuff in there. It's not quite ready for video, but it's getting there. So as soon as I have a project that I feel like deserves sort of a video wrap up, I'm going to put that on the YouTube channel. I have taken some video of some greenhouse automation stuff that I'm working on. I have a little greenhouse on my front porch. I grow like peppers and stuff. And so I'm going to do some greenhouse automation, some sort of like IoT based stuff. And
Nice.
I've taken some video related to that. So that is probably a video that's coming up this year.
Very exciting. Stay tuned for greenhouse automation videos. And again, follow Nick at the links below. And yeah, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime. I love to talk about stuff.
Awesome. Come back anytime. Thank you all for joining us this morning, or whatever time it is for you as well. Have an awesome rest of your days, and we'll see you soon.